Welcome to Magic English Stories, where every tale helps you learn, feel, and grow in English. Eldenbrook was the kind of village that time forgot. With its cobbled streets, moss-covered roofs, and an ancient church bell that chimed every hour with a tone that felt almost sacred, it stood as a relic of a quieter, slower era. The village had seen generations pass through its narrow lanes, but few were as quietly respected and equally misunderstood as Arthur Penrose. Arthur had lived in Eldenbrook for nearly 15 years, having moved into the old stone cottage at the edge of Rowan Hill shortly after taking early retirement. At 68, his appearance was neat and deliberate. His silver hair was always combed back, and his clothes, though worn, were kept impeccably tidy. Every morning he walked to the corner shop to buy the paper and exchange quiet pleasantries with Mrs. Lovell, the elderly shopkeeper who never forgot to ask about his health. His evenings were spent in the company of books, jazz records, and the occasional letter he never sent. Yet no one in Eldenbrook really knew Arthur. He was courteous but distant, kind but guarded. His past was a matter of speculation among the villagers. Some believed he had lost his wife, others whispered of a scandal in the city. But Arthur never offered explanations, and over time, curiosity waned. It was only the children, always curious, unburdened by social formality, who dared ask the occasional question. To those who noticed, Arthur's eyes often betrayed a depth of emotion that his words never did. It was as though he carried an invisible burden, one too heavy to name. But Arthur had grown adept at hiding pain, perfecting the art of quiet survival. What no one knew was that his soul bore the silent scars of a tragedy from his past, one that haunted him in the quiet hours. Between dusk and dawn, his home reflected his mind, orderly, silent, yet brimming with history. Bookshelves lined the walls of every room, filled with volumes of Shakespeare, Austen, and Eliot, each annotated in Arthur's neat script. There was an old typewriter on his desk, where he occasionally wrote fragments of letters or journal entries, always dated, never signed. It was a Tuesday morning in early autumn when the letter arrived. The post came late that day, delivered by young Jamie Harrow, who had taken the job over the summer. Arthur didn't normally receive personal mail, only bills, newsletters, and the occasional library notification. But this envelope stood out. Thick parchment, hand-addressed, and carrying a faint scent of lavender. He set it down beside his tea, hesitating. For several minutes he stared at it, the way one might examine a long-lost photograph. Finally, curiosity overcame caution, and he broke the seal. Dear Mr. Penrose, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Emily Marsh. I'm not sure if you remember me. I was quite young when we last met, but I am the younger sister of Daniel Marsh, who was your student many years ago. I believe you taught him literature in Year 11. I have carried his memory with me every day since his passing. For years, I have tried to piece together who he was outside of our family, what he loved, what he feared, and most of all, what he left behind in the hearts of others. I've recently moved to a town not far from Eldenbrook, and after much contemplation, I felt compelled to reach out. There is so much I never had the chance to ask you. About him, about that time, and about how it all ended. Would you be willing to meet for tea one afternoon? I understand if this is difficult, but I believe it could bring peace to us both. Yours, sincerely, Emily Marsh Arthur folded the letter slowly. A tremor ran through his fingers. The name Daniel Marsh struck a chord so deep it was like the echo of a bell long thought silenced. Memories flooded back, of a bright boy with a poetic soul, of a school trip to the cliffs, of a moment that changed everything. He rose from his chair and walked to the small drawer in his study. From it, he retrieved an old photograph. A group of students smiling against the backdrop of the white cliffs of Dover. Daniel stood in the middle, his eyes full of life and possibility. Arthur had not looked at this photo in years. He traced Daniel's face with a shaking finger. The guilt returned, cold and familiar. Though the authorities had called it an accident, Arthur had always blamed himself. He had been responsible for those students. He had been the one who organized the trip, the one who had looked away for a moment too long. He sat down and read the letter again. Then, slowly and deliberately, he placed it on the desk and began to write a reply. It was a week later when they met. The cafe on Mill Street was quiet, with floral curtains that filtered in soft autumn sunlight. Emily had chosen a corner table, tucked away beneath a shelf of dusty novels and porcelain teapots. Arthur spotted her immediately. She looked so much like Daniel, especially around the eyes. "Mr. Penrose?" she asked gently, standing as he approached. Her voice was soft, yet assured. "Arthur, please," he said, extending his hand. Her grip was firm. They sat, a tentative silence forming between them. The waitress came and went, bringing a pot of Earl Grey and 2 plates of scones. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Emily began, stirring her tea. "I know it can't be easy." Arthur shook his head. "No, but perhaps it's time. For too long, I've been running from memories that were never meant to be forgotten." They talked for hours, beginning with Daniel's childhood. How he'd scribble poems on the backs of homework sheets. How he would quote Byron when upset. How he once cried when a pigeon died on the school lawn. Arthur found himself smiling at things he hadn't recalled in years. And then came the harder part. The cliffs, the wind, the absence of a hand that should have been held. Emily didn't cry. She listened. And when Arthur faltered, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "I've blamed you in my head for so long, but I see now you were just as lost as the rest of us." Arthur's eyes welled up. He hadn't wept in decades. Not at the inquest, not when he left teaching, not even during the long nights alone. But now something inside him cracked, and the tears came freely. Outside, the church bell rang 5 times, the hour of quiet reflection. Following their meeting, Arthur felt a strange sense of lightness, as though some great invisible weight had lifted. The past was still there, of course, lurking in shadowed corners, but its presence felt less suffocating. And when Emily wrote again, this time suggesting they collaborate on a project in Daniel's memory, Arthur didn't hesitate. She had secured a part-time position at the local library, helping with literacy outreach programs. The idea was simple: create a community reading group focused on poetry and reflective writing, open to all ages. Arthur would lead sessions on classic literature, and Emily would curate selections from Daniel's writings, preserved in old notebooks she had rediscovered in her family attic. Their first meeting was modest. 4 attendees sat in the circle: Mrs. Lovell, young Jamie Harrow, a retired music teacher named Hugh MacArthur, and a painfully shy teenager named Tessa, who barely raised her eyes from her notebook. Arthur began with a reading of Thomas Hardy's Drummer Hodge, followed by a quiet, thoughtful discussion on war, loss, and identity. Over time, the group grew. Word spread through Eldenbrook that something meaningful was stirring at the library. People began to share more than literary opinions. They shared fragments of themselves. A woman spoke of her brother lost to addiction. Jamie, usually cheerful, revealed he was helping support his single mother. Even Tessa began to speak, her voice soft but sure, about her struggles with anxiety and her love of fantasy fiction. Arthur was astonished by the depth of the connections being forged. Through poetry, through story, the villagers found new ways of being seen, of being heard. And in that room, with shelves of books towering around them and the scent of old paper and hope mingling in the air, Arthur found something too: forgiveness. He began writing again, not just journal fragments or unfinished letters, but stories. Fiction sometimes, other times memories laced with imagined endings. Emily encouraged him gently but persistently, promising to edit if he would keep going. Together, they began compiling a small anthology to publish in Daniel's name. And one evening, after a particularly emotional reading of Daniel's poem, The Quiet Ones, Arthur looked around at the faces glowing in the soft light of the library lamps and realized something remarkable. He had found a family again. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more.